This is my mother. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. This is my father. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Oh, hello there. It's Professor Victor Singingeagle back again. Today we are discussing, I guess this is lecture 3 for Native American literature here at Sisseton, Wahpeton College. We're going to discuss, as we open up our semester, whatever you want to call it, talking about the generations of Native writers and why this is important for us in Native American literature class, or I should say First Nations literature class. Before I get started, I gotta wet the whistle. Hold on. I need my 绿茶，中国绿茶真的很好喝。Fabulous. Yummy. All right. Now, let's see if I can make this bigger. There we go. This is a quick overview of some multiple generations of Native writers that we need to discuss. And this, of course, this list is not complete because there's bunches and bunches of them, and we don't have enough time to talk about all of them. But we do need to focus on some of the themes and the thematic elements of their writing. Ooh. So first of all, got a little bit of tea leaves in my teeth. I hate when that happens. Anyway, we're going to start with the earliest writers. We did the oral tradition a little bit last time, but now we want to talk about published writers. This is where finally, I would say, people are starting to pay attention to natives a little tiny bit. And how did this happen? Well, you see, back in the old days in the 19th century, when the government and various religions were grabbing Indians and pulling them off the res and shaving their heads and stuffing them into boarding schools, or up north we call them residential schools, because you guys know I'm a double agent, Canadian-American or American-Canadian, whatever. Residential schools in Canada, down here in the States, we call them boarding schools. But this time, the idea, of course, as Du Huawei, Harvey Dumars might have told you, was this idea we're going to take these Indians away from their parents and so they'll get away from their backwards learning and backwards tribal traditions and their terrible savage languages, pagans worshiping trees and rocks. And we're going to teach them how to be good, hard-working Christian men and women. Kill the Indian and save the man, right? So we know this. We know this. Those of us who have followed, if I'm preaching to the choir, I apologize, but we just want to make sure we're all on the right page here, or we all agree, you see, with this historical stuff. Well, how did this show up in our literature? What happened is a lot of these youngsters who went to these boarding schools, they'd get educated and they turn their education around and tell their stories and tell all books and novels and what have you. I don't want to call them novels. It's a terrible term. I forgot the term memoirs or something like that. We've got people like William Apess, who was a Pequot Indian. And despite what they might have told you in various history classes, no, the Pequots are not all dead. As a matter of fact, they probably have one of the biggest and best casinos in the States right now. But the Pequot, he was, I forget his years, but something like the late 1700s to the early 1800s. Zitkala-Ša, whom we all know, is a Yankton Dakota down there. John Joseph Matthews, James Paitiamo, who's Akuma. Matthews is Osage. John Milton Oskison, Cherokee Darcy McNichol, who's flathead, and I forgot what they call themselves really, but I know that they're related to the Spokane people, and the Spokane people call themselves Spookani, which means children of the sun, and they have a mutually intelligible language anyway. But these are all, remember, we're talking the end of the 19th century, maybe even the beginning of the 19th century, all the way to the first quarter of the 20th century. What these folks had in common in their writing, this thing is annoying me. I'm trying to hold my gut in because, you know, when you start getting old, you get a big gut. I'm going to take this thing off. It's annoying. Get away! Well, their writings were, I want to call it, I want to use the term, no, there's a term for it. I forgot what the fellow's name is right now. Gerald Visner. He has a term for it where they're writing in very flowery, can't talk today, flowery, highfalutin, formal language that's very polite, but that's on the surface, you see. But underneath, they're doing a little bit of subversion there, where they're telling their story, but they're telling it in a way that you can tell they're being a little bit sarcastic or ironic in their tone, where they're saying, oh yeah, you know, they shaved my head because, you know, they thought I looked like a savage, and meanwhile they're arguing about money. But never mind that, we're going to stay focused because they wanted me to learn how to pray. Never mind the fact that they're gambling on the weekends and molesting the kids when the sun goes down. And you know, I'm starting to stand up here and mess up. The main thing is keep in mind that these authors, every single one of them, is using grandiose formal language in a way that will appeal to their non-native readers, but also to expose the hypocrisy and the abuse that they suffered in boarding schools and in general life, the discrimination and subjugation that went on relentlessly throughout the 18th, 19th, and beginning of the 20th century. Again, they're using very ingratiating language in their writing. And sometimes it seems a little boring, so you have to kind of read between the lines when you look at their things. I did post on e-learning, hope I don't spill this, where it says extra credit discussion, Zitkala-Ša book. The whole book, I found it online. This is all the hard work I've been doing for you. If you click on it, boop, hopefully it's not stuck behind a paywall. It's still there. Yay! And there's no paywall. I love it. And you can actually do this. No, it's not going to work. I'll do it this way then. Turn the pages. And if you're one of the old school guys like I am, you can actually order the book online and get the real hard book to hold in your hot little hands. But you can see, whereupon I tore away at my highest possible speed, my long black hair blowing in the breeze. I was a wild little girl of 7, loosely clad in a slip of brown buckskin. This is Zitkala-Ša telling her story, living on the res. And her mother is a little bit in a sad, feeling sad sometimes. And she wonders, why does Mom always look so sad? And she says, Mom, how come? And Mom said, never mind me. Show me how fast you can run. So that's kind of what's going on. She's talking about her fun times. And suddenly some, they call them pale faces in this book. Pale faces show up on the res. And they, how do I want to say this in a nice way? They kind of sweet talk the little children and they come to our boarding school. You have such a good time and it's so fun. And of course, you know what really happened. So we'll get off of this. We'll go back to our course. Have a look at that at your leisure. It's an awesome read. Let me see. So that's what that's all about. Let's go back to our lesson plan. A lot of these other authors write very similar stories. That's kind of and the theme might be the struggle for survival in this onslaught where we are told that we are savages and our language is pagan language and all that fun stuff. And back in the days, when we went to St. Philomena Elementary School in Carson, California, that's day school. But they did the same thing to us there too. If we got caught speaking Indian language, the nuns would put tape on our mouth, masking tape. This is before duct tape made its debut. We had to wear masking tape if we got caught speaking English, and they used to whack our knuckles and pull our hair and twist our ears and all that fun Catholic school stuff. And I'm sure they did it at other residential schools affiliated with other religions as well. Now, let's jump on over to the second quarter of the 20th century. This is all the way up to the 1980s. So we want to say probably the late 20s to the 1980s, maybe a little later than that. Our themes are resistance and recovery. Now, this is very important for us as students of Native literature, because when I get at this, our textbooks, we don't really talk about N. Scott Momaday, which is a shame, because N. Scott Momaday was like the spearhead of what we call the Native American Renaissance, you see. What do I mean by that? Well, these books made a big splash. This is the first quarter, the first generation of writers. They made a big splash, but of course, you know how Americans and Canadians can be. Once it fades from collective memory, you forget about all the Indian. Never mind, they don't matter. But then suddenly, N. Scott Momaday comes along. I think Harvey Dumars actually rubbed elbows with him, as did I. That's how old I am. I'm not as, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say that. Not going to say it. But Harvey's like one generation above me. Let's just say that. How's that? That sounds nicer. But he's still the good twin, and I'm the evil twin. Ask him about it sometimes. Never mind. Momaday. Why do I say he is important? It's because he is the one who wrote Way to Rainy Mountain and another book. Suddenly I'm drawing a blank. I think it's called House Made of Dawn. I believe Way to Rainy Mountain was his PhD dissertation. And this is at UC Berkeley, if I remember right, or did he go to Stanford? Anyway, when he's doing his dissertation, and it just made a big splash, because people have forgotten that Indians were still alive, and they're still around. No, the Indians are extinct. And suddenly, Momaday writes this awesome book that nobody had ever thought about, and it made a big splash in the 50s, 60s, around there, and suddenly Indians were cool again. And then following him was Leslie Marmon Silko. She's kind of like me. She's got ADHD, something terrible, but and wiggles a lot. She's still around. The late James Welsh, who passed away, I forget when it was, probably 10 years ago now. Louise Erdrich, who's still around. By the way, he's Kiowa, but he lived in the, I want to say the Pueblo areas of New Mexico or Arizona, somewhere is the desert area. Silko is a Pueblo Indian. She's Laguna. A lot of these guys are related. James Welch, who's Blackfoot or Blackfeet. Louise Erdrich, who's Ojibwe or Chippewa, or as you guys call them, the rabbit chokers. These guys, their theme, important for us in our class, is resistance and recovery. What do I mean by this? Well, their writings expose the beauty or reassert the beauty of Native culture and tradition, but also talk about revival of our culture and tradition, and reasserting it, recovering from all the damage that was done to us. And you'll see that in a lot of their stories. And I'll have to bring the books next time and quote from some of them. Not right now, because I'm already talking too much. The 1980s to the 2000s, I only put two people. We got a Spokane, Sherman Alexie, my old buddy. We went to college together. He went to Gonzaga, and I went to Eastern Washington University. But on the weekends, we go out and party, and neither one of us drink alcohol. So he'd drink Pepsi, I drink Coke, and we go into these KTV, or they call them karaoke here in the States. We go and sing karaoke, and never mind. But yeah, Sherman, everybody, he's really famous. He got into a little bit of trouble about 10 years ago, or maybe it was a little less. It was right before COVID hit. He got me too'd. Don't get me started. I tried to warn him, but never mind. We're going to stay focused. And Tiffany Midge. These two started off as poets. And both of them have a lot of cool humor and sarcasm, but they also challenge what does it mean to be an Indian? Who's a real Indian? Who's not? Fake Indian, they call them pretendians. And they're really, the sarcasm is just perfect in their writings. I'll have to bring some of that for you next time as well. Tiffany and I were just chatting the other day, and she sent me an autographed book. I was so happy. But never mind. We're going to go on to the 2010s, to the present. I need to write to Tommy Orange. Tommy Orange, Cheyenne, Arapaho. Oh, I forgot. Right. It says right there. Tiffany Midge is Lakota. I think she's Hunk Papa. But back to this. Tommy Orange, who's Cheyenne, Arapaho. He's one of the new generations of Native writers. His big thing is the modern times and future struggles, as is Sherry DeMaline, who's Métis up in Canada, and Eric Gansworth, who's an Onondaga. What's really cool about these folks are they're writing about urban Indians, which oftentimes get overlooked in Native literature, urban Indians. A lot of times what happens is we get, during the time what I call forced relocation, our tribe, we call it the Trail of Death. Others had the Trail of Tears, but when they're moving the Indians around at gunpoint and marching them around or loading them up into boxcars like cattle and forcing them to move to Oklahoma, or in the case of my people, they moved us from Michigan down to Iowa or Indiana, then to Iowa, then down to Kansas, and then down to Oklahoma, which was a mess. Well, a bunch of Indians, my tribe included, the runaway band of Potawatomi Indians, ran away. That's why we're called the runaway band. Some ran up to Canada, some ran down to Mexico, and some got jobs and pretended to be other races. Some pretended to be Mexican, some pretended to be Cuban, whatever they can get away with. And they got jobs working on the railroad, or they got jobs in the city. Some pretended to be black, whatever they could do to get away from the persecution and being forced to live in these concentration camps that are now reservations. But the problem is, you see, these urban Indians, a lot of them don't have recognition or any kind of tribal status. Same thing in Canada as well. They don't get any Indian stuff. I don't know how to say it any better than that. Well, Tommy Orange dramatizes life in the Bay Area, because a bunch of Indians moved to the Bay Area of California, San Francisco area, Oakland. And he talks about these Indians living in the city, which is a new thing. It doesn't appear in a lot of these other folks. They write about life on the res, but he's kind of like a new thing, talking about Indians in the city. Sherry DeMaline, I believe she is the one that wrote The Marrow Thieves. I could be wrong, But this is sort of like a science fiction slash zombie novel. I don't know how to describe it, where non-natives, especially the Washichu, have lost the ability to dream. And so they need only people who can still dream are the Indians. So they start hunting Indians and stealing their bone marrow so that the bone marrow allows them to regain the ability to dream. It's really weird. And I'm still reading the novel. And then I have not read any of Eric Gansworth's work, but I did order it, and I'll have to share it with you as soon as I get it. Now, how much time do I have? Because I'm supposed to start bugging you about Zitkala-Ša. 20 minutes? All right, I'm going to stop it here, and I'm going to continue in the next video. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Talk to you later.